Can wrestling survive with no audience until August? We discuss that now on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. Joining me on Skype is Ralph Valenti for news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling. Subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. So this conversation all stems from the fact that Donald Trump met with commissioners of pro sports leagues and WWE last weekend. And the current plan is for arenas and stadiums to start having fans in August. Ralph, can wrestling survive without fans?
I think it's a little bit of a loaded question, and I think that at face value, can wrestling survive? I think it can survive, but I think it will limp along, and the fan base will continue to tune out, which obviously, if you pay attention to the ratings and the viewership, to a certain extent, they've certainly done that. The other question, aside from can it survive, is should they even be holding shows? You know, at a smaller level, at the minimal capacity that they've been doing shows, whether you're WWE, NXT, AEW, any of those companies, you know, should they be doing that? Knowing that every single time they put on one of those shows, they go out there, they have a taping, they have guys that are obviously all over each other, and there's no social distancing within a wrestling ring. Should they be doing that? I mean, every time they do that, they jeopardize the health of the professional wrestlers and the talent and the referees and the crew that's there. So I think it can survive, but it certainly will not be to the extent that we've seen professional wrestling prior to this.
Now, obviously, both shows have had their weird dynamics to this, and some have done it better than others. We see AEW and WWE on a weekly basis since this all started. It seems like AEW, for the most part, have done a better showing. But like you said, their ratings have kind of had the biggest hit when it comes to Raw, SmackDown, NXT, and AEW. But, you know, they've been having the best shows with that quasi audience with whatever wrestlers aren't wrestling. They just use them as an audience. I don't know how much longer they could do that. I know they have a lot of content all the way till May. Wrestling fans just want some kind of content because you look on television right now, it's literally the news and the news and the news and the news. And at what point it's like, all right, can we just get something else to get our minds off of what the hell is on the news? And at least WWE and AEW are providing that. It's going to be weird. Right. We all know it's weird seeing it with no fans. And I know some people have commented on this, including CM Punk. And here's his quote. With pro wrestling, I find it completely impossible to watch with no crowd. The audience is 100%, and this is more evident than ever now. Driving force behind what wrestlers do in the ring. That's what CM Punk recently said. I agree. Some of these matches could be a lot better had there been a crowd. We talked about that this past weekend at WrestleMania. We talked about it on our reviews of AEW, Dynamite, and NXT, how matches could be better without fans. But maybe this is a chance for AEW and WWE to think outside the box, and they have so far with this cinematography approach that we've seen with the deletion matches, and we saw with Lucha Underground, where now it's just got to be a production. And you know what? Some of these wrestlers even think like, you know what? It's not a sport. It's a art form. So why not run with this and make it a literal sense?
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's where you try to find that balance, because you certainly got that with the Undertaker and AJ Styles match, and you certainly got that with the Firefly Funhouse match, and you even got a little bit of that with Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa and their what most people would assume is the blow-off match. I think going back maybe about 6 months ago, we did an episode where we talked about the progression and of the wrestling industry and how things have changed, and how, you know, some people want it to be more of a sport, like the old guard would want it to be considered more of a sport or presented more as a competition between people. And maybe that's not what needs to change. Maybe it's not where, you know, the AEW approach where they want it to be more like a sports league. Maybe that's not what people are into. Maybe it does have to become more of a cinematography type thing where it's more cinematic and it's more staged. I mean, I'm not saying that that's going to work in, you know, a large portion, because I think once you go to that well too many times, people will get used to it like they get used to anything else and just kind of tune it out. But obviously they were onto something. WWE was onto something because, you know, when you talk about WrestleMania, obviously it worked. I mean, people were talking about WrestleMania being a really good show. It was all over social media as the most talked about WrestleMania of all time. People were praising the Boneyard match and to a certain extent the Firefly Funhouse match. I haven't really seen too much negative things said about Tommaso Ciampa and Gargano. So, I think that everybody now, no matter who you talk to, a wrestling fan, somebody who's not a wrestling fan, knows that the outcomes are predetermined. Knowing that, people watch professional wrestling to get their mind off certain things, like what's going on in the world right now. People watch it to be entertained. Now, by professional wrestling standards, what you saw at WrestleMania was not professional wrestling. What you saw between Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano was somewhat professional wrestling, but it's not being presented as, competition amongst two people. It was supposed to be cinematic and supposed to draw you in, have good drama, and it did all that, and it actually distracted you from the fact that there was no crowd. So maybe they do need to go a little further to the entertainment side, at least for now, to try and make sure that people are at least invested in the programming. Because without the crowd, to a certain extent, you're definitely hurting a lot of your storylines, and you kind of expose it a little bit as well.
Yeah, I totally agree there. And, here's the other thing too, is everybody's starting to get that itch to get back into that normal lifestyle, right, and just not see the news 24/7 talking about this. Even Dana White was talking about this, trying to get UFC on a remote island just to get people to watch some content. And here's what he said with ESPN. He's saying, I'm ready to get back. I think a lot of other people are ready to get back. First of all, everybody's afraid to be the first. Realistically, the only guy right now who isn't afraid is me and Vince McMahon. I kind of get what Dana White's saying here. Like, everybody's so worried about, if you break the rules, you're causing the spread to get worse and the spread won't slow down fast enough. But someone's got to be the first, right?
Yeah, somebody's got to be the first, but there's also a lot of liability that's associated with that, and a lot of negative press, assuming somebody does end up getting sick.
True.
Which is likely, considering that these guys are going to have to travel, they're going to have to fly, they are going to be in close contact with one another because it's the nature of their business, whether it's UFC or WWE. But no, I definitely get where he's coming from. Somebody's going to have to be the first. There has to be some type of steps taken towards normal at some point. The question is going to be, when is that time? How do you do it safely? How do you do it safely for the health of your wrestlers or your professional athletes? If you're talking about the UFC, how do you start to introduce the crowds again? I think for the time being, they're doing the very best that they can. I've seen certain people talk about how WWE is only doing this for money. I don't think this is about money. I just think this is about WWE trying to put out a product, trying to keep their fans engaged, because if they bow out of this, you don't have professional sports. You're not going to have wrestling. You don't have MMA right now. What are you going to watch? You've got what? Netflix, Disney Plus, the news. I can't watch any more of the news. I don't want to watch the news. I want to disconnect from everything. I want somebody to provide some type of entertainment. I want them to do it safely, but I definitely commend AEW and commend WWE for doing something to try and get people's minds off of this, at least as much as they can, because it is kind of unprecedented times and scary times. But I definitely applaud what WWE did during WrestleMania, because they thought outside the box for once. And I think that if this goes on, for an extended period of time, let's say past the expectation of when the curve is going to flatten, or, whatever ends up happening with this, they're going to have to continue to think outside the box, whether you're WWE, whether you're AEW, because, these are big companies. If they're not operating and they're not entertaining people, people are not going to be paying attention to them. And ultimately that could mean a lot of bad things, especially for a company like AEW, who doesn't necessarily have the infrastructure that WWE has. On the other side of that, you also have to consider, by doing these shows, are they hurting the storylines and are they hurting the talent? Certain instances of that is, obviously, you look at Rhea Ripley, who lost to Charlotte Flair. A lot of people were upset about that, but when you look at the circumstances, can you really blame them? When you look at Drew McIntyre getting his big moment at WrestleMania, what was supposed to be a huge moment, and you have no fans there, do you postpone that? You've invested so much in that storyline, whether it's between Brock Lesnar and him. Are you now squandering these moments? Are you ruining it for your fans? So those are the things that they have to weigh out. Is it really worth it to extend these shows out, to progress these storylines, or should they pause and should they step aside for a little bit? Let for everything clear up, wait for your moments, whether that's SummerSlam or soon after SummerSlam or whenever that time is, and give the opportunity to people like Io Shirai, Rhea Ripley, Braun Strowman, Drew McIntyre. That's what they have to start to consider as well.
Yeah, so there are some silver linings in all this, in that they're going to be forced with a very skeleton crew to build these new stars, and that's AEW, that's WWE. So, you brought it up, Braun Strowman, Drew McIntyre, Io Shirai, those are the ones that are going to have to step up because they're the ones that are currently able to and are willing to compete. You look at AEW, Hangman Page is nowhere to be found because he's in self-isolation. So you got to build some tag teams, and stepping up are the best friends. And Trent Beretta having good matches. Darby Allin stepping up and Sammy Guevara stepping up when you're not seeing some main event guys like MJF there every week. So obviously the storylines are going to be a little interesting in how they execute them, especially in AEW where you have Cody and the Lance Archer storyline. Yes, Cody and Archer are there, but the main focus of the storyline is Jake the Snake Roberts. He is not there. He's actually been in quarantine in Atlanta at an Atlanta hotel. He actually talked about this on Wrestling Inc., saying that he was living with DDP, and DDP said, if you go to that taping, you're not coming back because I have a baby in the house and we can't get the baby sick. So now Jake the Snake Roberts is basically self-isolating in some remote hotel in Atlanta.
Yeah.
But he's not physically on the shows. Yes, they've been able to tape these pre-recorded promos, which have been good, by the way, but you can't do that with everybody. Or can you? Can you have these more pre-produced promos like we saw with Hager and Moxley, build their empty arena match, no holds barred for the AEW championship? That's really where we have to start thinking here. Like, what do we do if we can't get everybody in the ring, but still progress the storylines? Produce promos.
And that's the thing, I don't know what the magic bullet's going to be. I don't know what other type of concepts they can come up with to kind of distract you away from the fact that there is no crowd. Because there's a certain chemistry that the crowd and a certain influence that the crowd has in, how a match is perceived. And maybe not so much for WWE, because one of the things that people have always they've been commenting on for quite some time now is just the fact that the crowd has been flat. They aren't as invested. But for AEW NXT, certainly the crowd is a big part of the show. Mm-hmm. That on top of the commentary, on top of the match itself. So taking away a key element of that, is not a good thing, especially when you consider some of the bigger moments like we talked about, or even like Edge coming back for his WrestleMania moment. Coming back with no fans there, that's not what he envisioned, I'm sure. That's not what the fans envisioned for him. That's not what people expected. But unfortunately, that's the situation we're in. So they're going to have to continue to think outside the box, continue to do different things if they truly intend to put on weekly shows. And they may have to look to do more of this cinematic stuff or do more promos, whatever you can to keep people engaged until the time comes where they can actually start producing live shows again.
From a wrestling fan watching at home, there is a positive to no fans, especially when watching WWE. You don't have fans hijacking matches. There's no stupid CM Punk chants or this is boring or beach balls. So you could focus in on the match itself. And some of these matches, you could appreciate the athleticism and how good these matches are because the fans aren't being idiots and hijacking matches just to hijack a match.
Yeah.
So I think that's another plus. That's the thing here. We have to look at the positives of this whole situation. I think the matches have been good because they're laying it all out there because they don't know when the last match is going to be for the foreseeable future. And the promos have been better because you don't have fans, interrupting them so they could just let it out. And you could feel like it's not as scripted or they're razzled because they're trying to remember their lines, but not be razzled by the fans. So I think that's right. A good silver lining. And the pre-production stuff obviously is going to be a major thing because you can edit all the mess ups, So
True.
that's all the positives. So to answer the question, can wrestling survive until August when live fans are supposedly going to be allowed back into arenas? I think so. And if for some reason they can't get the tapings in, another possible silver lining is a off season. How many times have we heard that fans want wrestling to have an off season, or wrestlers saying it would benefit for having an off season, especially with the schedule that WWE has where people are wrestling 200 to 300 dates a year? That's another.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And certainly you get guys that oftentimes become stale because you're seeing them week after week. It's the same promo. It's the same skit. It's the same approach. Sometimes guys need to take a step away to kind of recharge or revamp and come back. And it does wonders for them. I mean, it worked for guys like Kevin Owens. He's done it a couple of times to see guys go away from probably more so WWE because AEW is still fresh. It doesn't feel like a stale product. But with Raw, I should say, or with SmackDown, these guys that continuously get booked in these odd situations, sometimes a step away from the show is really what they need. So yeah, why not take this time as a time to take a pause? Maybe there's only certain guys that you're highlighting right now. Once you get to go back and do live television again, it's going to be that much more impactful, and it will be that much better for the fans. Look, if people are going to go to these shows, once it comes time for professional wrestling, whether it's WWE, NXT, AEW, whatever, when it becomes time for them to go live again, if fans are going to continue to complain about, storylines and booking and all this stuff, there's not everything that you're going to agree with. But I think we can all kind of sit back and say, wow, you know what? As bad as it was, I'll take bad WWE over what we've had, this type of WrestleMania, over anything we've had. And I actually enjoyed WrestleMania, but to not have a crowd there, to see the shows that we've been seeing, granted, they've been okay. People shouldn't be as picky as they were. And I'd probably include myself in that because once it comes time for those shows to be live again, I know I'm definitely going to be 100% invested in that product, whatever it may be.
Whatever that first show is, that first live show, whether that's an AEW show, whether that's a WWE show, a New Japan show, or whatever promotion it is, that crowd should be and better be the hottest freaking crowd we've ever witnessed. Because listen, we're wrestling fans too, and we want to go to shows and we want to see good professional wrestling, and we want to feel that energy from the crowd, and so do the wrestlers. I guarantee you that first night is going to be a night no wrestling fan will ever forget. It's that whole absence makes the heart grow fonder kind of thing. So, and think about this. If this happens where August is the time where fans are allowed back in arenas, August has an awesome month of wrestling planned. You have Summerslam and NXT TakeOver. You have New Japan Pro Wrestling coming to Madison Square Garden for Wrestle Dynasty. And you have All Out.
Yep.
Almost every weekend is filled with some awesome big show for professional wrestling, for the biggest promotions in the world. It better deliver. That's all I'm saying. It better deliver. Yep. And I know the fans who are very passionate, the markiest of marquee wrestling fans, are going to go to those shows and let you know that this is awesome.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm just waiting for all of this to pass over and trying to get back to normal, but we're taking it one day at a time. And, as long as everybody does their part, practices the social distancing, we can get back to that normal life sooner rather than later and start enjoying professional wrestling the way we're supposed to be enjoying it.
Yes, let's hope so. Let's hope it's before August, but that's the current plan right now. And let us know, can wrestling survive till August with no fans? In the comments below. Don't forget to share us all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. And for news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling, subscribe. Hit that bell for notifications. For Ralph Valenti via Skype, my name's Michael Valenti. Thank you for watching the Squared Circle Psychobabble.